Let's jump right into this explainer, where we're tackling a seriously universal frustration. You know the one. Knowing exactly what you need to do, but just not doing it, right? We've all been there. Whether it's finally kicking off that massive work project or, let's be real, just folding the laundry you've been staring at for like 3 days. Over the next 7 minutes or so, we're going to build a really wholesome, complete understanding of why this happens, and more importantly, how we can actually fix it.
Why can't I just do it? Man, we have all agonizingly asked ourselves this exact question. You stare at the to-do list, you know the benefits, you totally understand the consequences of ignoring it, and yet, crickets, nothing happens. But look, I want to reframe this for you right out of the gate. Your inability to act, it is not a sign that you're lazy. It doesn't mean you're fundamentally broken or that you just lack willpower. It is actually a mechanical systems problem. And just like any mechanical problem, it can be diagnosed and fixed once you understand how the parts work together.
So let's kick things off with Section 1, the skyscraper illusion.
We've got to start by completely separating the concept of understanding from the concept of execution. Treating them as the exact same thing, that is where all of our guilt begins. Think about a massive skyscraper. Knowing what to do is just the beautiful glass facade of the building. It's impressive, it's super easy to talk about, and from the outside, hey, it looks complete. But doing is the hidden internal structure. It's the heavy steel and concrete inside that actually absorbs the pressure, carries the weight, and proves whether the building can hold up in the real world. You can have a flawless blueprint and a gorgeous facade, but without that internal structure, the whole thing comes crashing down the second the wind blows.
Which brings us to Section 2, the chain of missing links. People so often picture this gap between knowing and doing as a giant cliff you just have to jump off. You either make the leap or you fall, right? But what if we treat behavior as a chain of smaller links? Suddenly we can identify exactly which link is snapping. You've got the signal, the idea actually showing up at the right time in your brain. Movement, your ability to start without immediate friction. Repetition, doing it again under totally normal, everyday conditions. Fit, how well it actually matches your identity. And support, whether your environment is helping you out or actively fighting you. If literally even one of these links weakens, the whole chain feels totally unreliable and the behavior just snaps.
Let's make this super tangible. Look at the movement link on that chain. Even if your intentions are perfectly clear, if a task has just a tiny bit of friction or uncertainty, it's exactly like trying to push a shopping cart with one stuck wheel. You know how annoying that is, right? The cart is still a cart. Your destination is totally clear, but that tiny mechanical issue makes every single push vastly harder than it needs to be. You can use all the motivation in the world to violently shove that cart down the grocery aisle, but motivation doesn't fix the wheel. You just end up completely exhausted.
Or take the repetition link. Pulling something off successfully just one time is completely different from stabilizing it as an ongoing habit. Doing something once is kind of like singing a song beautifully in a totally quiet room. It's easy, you hear yourself perfectly, zero distractions. But true repetition, that means the behavior has to survive the noise, the stress, the terrible moods, and the constant chaotic distractions of real life. If your plan only works on a perfect, sunny Sunday afternoon, there is no way it's going to survive a frantic Tuesday morning. Moving right along to Section 3, the threshold of action.
Look, action simply isn't a light switch you can just magically flip whenever you feel like it. It's a sequence of internal handoffs. Before you actually physically move, a task must enter your attention. Then, it has to have meaning. It needs to feel relevant right now. It also must match your current energy capacity, because if you're completely drained, it's just not happening. And finally, it needs permission, meaning it feels emotionally safe and acceptable to do in that exact moment. If any single one of these 4 forces is weak, the action stalls out before it even gets off the ground.
I love this analogy. Think of human behavior like a heavy door with one of those industrial spring closers on it. The door isn't frozen, it's not locked, and it certainly isn't broken, but it actively resists opening until the push you give it is stronger than the resistance pushing back. Action only exists as a possibility until there's enough internal force to finally cross that threshold and physically push the door open.
So how do we get the door open? Well, we usually try to force it using emotional intensity. We apply more pressure, we heap on the guilt, we try to manufacture panic and urgency at the last minute. But what actually works? Clarity. Clarity lowers the overall cost of acting by significantly reducing your mental chatter. And let's be honest, indecision is absolutely exhausting. Every extra question you have to ask yourself, like, do I do this now? How do I even start? Wait, where did I leave my notes? All of that creates drag. And that drag is the exact resistance that stops you from pushing the door open.
All right, Section 4, the architecture of habits.
This right here is exactly why that incredibly common piece of self-help advice, just do it, is so completely unhelpful. Yelling at yourself to just start completely ignores the 5-step sequence that dictates human behavior. You might have failed way earlier in the chain by simply not noticing the cue to act, or maybe you interpreted it as unimportant. Or you might fail at the very end. You begin, but you can't sustain it because of fatigue or some sudden interruption. Starting is literally just one tiny piece of the puzzle, and just doing it totally ignores the underlying architecture of how we actually operate.
And this is exactly where habits fit into the picture. A lot of folks think habits are just magical reservoirs of willpower that successful people somehow have way more of. They absolutely aren't. They are simply compressed decision-making. A habit removes that exhausting, super expensive internal debate of should I do this now or how should I begin. It shifts the entire burden of action away from fleeting momentary willpower and hands it over to a stored, reliable structure. It basically does all the heavy lifting for you.
Now, does this mean learning and knowledge are totally useless? Oh, not at all. Knowledge still profoundly matters because it acts as a map to help you create better cues, reduce all that uncertainty, and pinpoint exactly where the friction lives in your day. But we have to accept reality here. A map is incredibly clarifying, sure, but a map does not walk. Knowledge alone cannot physically force your internal system to move. You still have to take the route.
Let's wrap it up with Section 5, Becoming a Systems Designer.
So, if knowledge is just the map, how do we actually go about building the internal structure we need? The very first step, without a doubt, is changing the way we talk to ourselves. We absolutely have to shift away from vague self-criticism and shame, asking, why am I not doing what I know, and start asking much sharper diagnostic questions. We need to look at our lives and ask, okay, where exactly is the system breaking down? Is this action just too costly to begin? Does it conflict with my identity? Is my environment working against me?
Once you start viewing behavior as a system moving through these mechanical layers, signal, friction, repetition, identity, and environment, you completely change your approach. Behavior is built. It is constructed piece by piece. It's not just magically wished into existence through sheer force of will. When you truly internalize that, you can act with far less self-blame and far more precision. You actually stop just trying harder, and you start seeing more clearly where the real roadblocks actually are. I want to leave you with this final, genuinely empowering question. The next time you find yourself stuck in that knowing-doing gap, staring down a task you know you should be doing, instead of demanding that you just care more or punishing yourself with guilt, ask yourself, how can I design around the friction? What would make this behavior more likely to happen in the real world? Because when you finally stop judging yourself and start focusing on the system, you unlock the true ability to act. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.